We had 5 circles back then.
How did it work then? Because we don't have circles now.
Right, and I think that at the district level, they have districts and they have South Georgia conferences, which we're members of. And I think that they spoiled it. When I came here, the circles were all the Signora Batchelot Circle, the Jessie Seals Circle, the Maud Bunkley Circle, and
I don't know what
it
that
was
means.
named for saints of the church.
Oh, okay.
Some of those women were still here, still living. Maud Bunkley was still living, and most of them had passed on, though I didn't know them particularly. But that was the main part of the church, was those 6 circles, those 5 circles. It was when I came here, and my neighbor on Margaret Street was a Methodist, and she got me to go with her to her circle. And I had only been going to a circle meeting for just a short period of time. I knew nothing about the organization. And here he wanted me to be president of it. Well, we were having this revival, and I was playing for the revival in the old church. And the piano sat down on the floor over on the right-hand side. And that night I got through playing for the first part of the service, and I just sat on the front pew. And Jack Key preached about saying no when the preacher asks you to do something. And I sat there and I thought, you know,
Preaching to you.
he's preaching that sermon just to me. Because I had made up my mind I was not going to take the presidency of the Methodist Women. And he said, I couldn't wait for church to be over. And I went to Brother Bill and I said, I think that was hateful of you to have Jack preach that sermon he preached tonight. And he said, I didn't have anything to do with that. And he convinced me that he called Jack over and he said, you had your sermons all lined up before you came here, what you were going to preach on. And he said, yes. And that was his topic that night. And I said, okay, I guess I'll be president of the Methodist Women. So that's how I got to be president.
And how long were you the president?
Well, it was, you were re-elected every year, but I think I had it for about 4 years. And this other lady who has passed on now, Frances Thompson, they elected her to take my place because I was due to have Robert in 61, which was coming up. Our year ended in May, and we took the summer off, and we started back in September with a new year. I don't know why the Methodist Women, the WSCS, had their year run from September to the end of August. We were still president during the summer if something came up, if somebody died and we had to get up food, you know, all that stuff.
Did it match the school year maybe?
I don't know. It probably did. And I think it was a carryover from the preachers used to be moved in January. And they finally realized that it was hurting their children because they were having to change schools in the middle of the year. So they have annual conference when they...
in the summer, yeah.
Yeah, in the summer, in June. And they move in June. And then they have the summer to get situated, and before their children have to start school, they can make some friends with people. But anyway, we had, they built, during the time Billy Key was here, we built the a new parsonage across the street. We swapped. The man owned this land right in front of the church where the office is now. That was the parsonage where the preacher lived. And right around the corner, he also owned some land facing Reddy Street, which is the street beside the church. And he swapped us the land across the way for the house. And he had the house moved. The old parsonage is still standing.
Really?
It's apartment houses now. And he turned it into apartments. It was a 2-story house, and he turned it into apartments and rented it out. And we gave him the old house,
He
and
gave
he
us the
had it
land.
moved around the corner. It's still sitting there, you know, where the youth center is, the youth building. It's right next to it, facing that street. That's, and I guess there was nothing on that corner, because I remember when the house was built, it was built for a family that was moving here, and they built that house that is the youth center now. And we finally turned it into the office. It used to
Because
be
what's
the
the office
office
now
building.
was the parsonage.
That's right.
So
That's
you're just
right.
moving things around in the.
Yeah. So then when we built the new parsonage out here, after we built Bailey Hall, we built the new parsonage on Nancy Drive, and we moved the office into the old parsonage. And we had bought this building. When they left here, we told them that if they ever decided to sell the house, that we wanted first refusal of it. So the church bought the house, and it was turned into a youth center.
And that was just here recently, within the last
Yeah,
couple of years.
it was. So it was
So at what point when you started with the UMW, there were these 5 circles?
yeah,
But that's not how it is now.
no.
So at what point
Okay.
did we lose that?
We had 5 circles, and then they recommended that you not have more than 12 people, because they met in the homes. The circles met in the homes. And most people didn't have room for more than 12 people. you
Makes
know.
sense.
And so we had to form another circle while I was president. And we formed the Maud Bunkley Circle, which Miss Maud lived in one of those little houses that faced the side of the church, face Reddy Street, there beside the church. And she was a devout member of the church. And what we did when we wanted to form a new circle was we had everybody write down somebody's name on a piece of paper. And we kept eliminating them until we got down to the one that had the most names, you know. We would consider that one and let them vote again, just like they do when they elect the Pope. So we elected and named it the Maud Bunkley Circle after Miss Maud. She was still very much a part of the church. And then we had 6 circles. Then they came along with the Wesleyan Service Guild. That was for the working people.
Okay.
We had 2 circles that met in the morning, 2 in the afternoon at 3 o'clock, and 2 that met at night. And we cut back. We lost 2 circles when they formed the Wesleyan Service Guild. Mrs. Todd was the first president of that.
And that doesn't even exist anymore, does it?
No,
It's never- okay.
no, it phased out at the conference level or the district
Okay.
level or somewhere. They did away with it. but we cut back on our circles
So that people could be
because
that.
the working people,
Now, is that still just for women? It was for working women?
yeah. That was all that the Wesleyan Service Guild was working women, school teachers, and they could come to the afternoon circles because they would come straight from school,
Mm-hmm.
To wherever the circle was meeting. But then somebody decided we shouldn't name them after people, that we should have interest circles. In other words, it separated people by age. We had the old women's circle. We had we didn't call them circles, we called them interest groups. And we had the young, theirs was the M&M circle, Mary and Martha.
Okay.
They're biblical names.
Right.
And the Koinonia circle.
Which is
We
now a
have
Sunday school
Koinonia
class.
Sunday school class now. Don't ask me what Koinonia means, but anyway, it stands for something in the Bible.
Okay.
And we had
So do you think that,
the Wesleyan Service Guild. Well, they did away with
Do you
the
think that
Wesleyan
hurt?
Service School.
making them interest groups as opposed to these circles, do you think that helped or hurt the
Well,
group as a whole?
I thought it helped because you had 12 people and you were supposed to take the names at the end of the year and put them all in a bowl and get your circle people, your chairman of the circles. Each circle had a chairperson, and let them draw. They would walk around the table and draw a name, and the next one would draw a name, and the next one, then they'd start over again until all the names were drawn. And that was to keep it from forming a little clique. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you never knew who you were going to be in a circle with the next year. And I thought that was good because, and the old women were mixed up with the young women and,
Right.
and everything. And I learned a lot from the older women being in circles with them. And I think we miss that now.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I'm with the older women now, but I don't feel like it. But I'll
But
be
once the only people you see are those people that are just like you,
yeah.
then you don't
And-
get the
And then when they have a mass, and paper mills move around a lot, they get a better job at another paper mill somewhere, so they're going. And the M&M circle was the Mary and Martha circle, and it was the young people, the young marrieds. They all had children, small children, babies and all. And it just, everybody moved away.
mm-hmm.
And it fizzled out. But you didn't draw for circles after you had the interest groups.
So once there's only one or two people left, there's nobody to have a
That's
circle
right.
with.
And the
and they
same
couldn't
thing,
belong together.
the same thing happened to the older circle.
They'd start to
They
pass
died
on.
off.
Mm.
And so the circles gradually, we got down to, we had 2 circles at one time. And then they realized that the same people, you had your business meeting. Where all the
Once a month.
circles came together once a month. You had the business meeting at night. And you had one circle would being responsible for the program, and the other circle would be responsible for refreshments. And we just had cake or pies or something,
Like we do now.
and something to drink. And we didn't have a meal. I don't know when exactly that started, that we would have a meal.
I don't
You
know.
know.
Now it's over again.
Yeah,
The last several months has been.
all right. And so that's when it gradually got down to a handful of people that were going to the circle meeting and coming to the business meeting. They did away with the WSCS and they did away with the Wesleyan Service Guild. and you had the Koinonia Circle, and you had the Susanna Wesley Circle, and you had the M&M Circle, Mary and Martha, and I can't remember all the circles. But during that time, I dropped out. And then later on, I went back in. So there was a period of time.
So why did you drop out, and then why did you go back?
I went back because a good friend of mine became president, and she hounded me to death. She sang in the choir with me, Audrey Clark. I don't know if you know Audrey or not. Now she goes to Presbyterian Church with her husband, but she became president of the WSCS and of the UMW. See, I still want to say WSCS.
When did it make that change to UMW?
I don't remember exactly the year that they made the change, but it was after they did away with the Wesleyan Service Guild. And they said, well, you could not have circles.
At all?
You had to have, right, you had to have interest groups. And that divided you, what you were interested in was your age group. And they became divided by age.
But then we don't have that now.
All the other women were in the older circle, Susanna Wesley circle, and the young people were in the M&M circle, and the ones in the middle were in the Koinonia circle, and you know,
right.
We just, and I think that was the downfall of the circles. It gradually played out because you didn't draw for new circles every year like we did. And
do you think that's something that could benefit from coming back? Or, because I know right now we just have the monthly meeting.
You know, I don't know if that would work or not now, because we had nurses. Most of the women, if they worked, they were nurses or they were school teachers. They worked for a doctor's office or
the school.
And everybody didn't work like they, you know, I worked, but I worked for my husband, so I could get off and go to the circle meetings. I tried to go to all of them when I was president.
Right.
I didn't belong to a particular one. I visited with all of them. And it was so much fun to go into people's homes and have refreshments, just cake or coffee or something to drink. Or I don't know whether it has served its purpose. Now, about the main thing we do for the church, church-wide, is
the funerals.
Yeah. And get up the food and serve the meal. And back then, let me tell you what we had to do. There was no restaurants in St. Mary's, no fast food, no supermarkets. We had a Swanee store, and we had a Roland store down where I don't know what it is now. It used to be the French Quarter downtown. It was right across the street from the drugstore. And we built our own building eventually and moved out of the hotel because the old hotel was not used. They were renting rooms to people that would come here to work for the mill, and they would just rent a room by the week upstairs. And we had something happen one day. All of a sudden the ceiling fell in at the drugstore.
Oh my Lord.
And the water started pouring in, and somebody had gone off and left the tub running, the water running in the tub, and when it ran over. So that's when Artis decided he had to get out of the hotel. And he built his own building right next to the hotel. I don't know what is in it right now, but it's the building right next to the hotel, that building that we built, and moved the drugstore down there. But we were just leasing
Right.
where Siegel's restaurant is. Is where the drugstore was.
Oh, okay.
That was the drugstore. And although it was only about half as big as it is now, they have put a petition up in there, and we finally talked them into the hotel into buying. There were other stores behind us, and we talked them into buying those and letting us knock out the walls and make the drugstore bigger. So
That's cool. So then, because there were no grocery stores and no fast food places.
no, and we had to, when somebody had a death in the family, we took in breakfast food. We didn't go in and cook the breakfast, but we took in breakfast food, eggs and bacon and paper towels and paper goods and everything. And we fed them the meals, every meal, until they buried the person. We didn't have a place for them to meet, for the family to come to the church to eat.
So you would take it out of their house.
So it was taken to the house. You would find out how many, well, you knew everybody by then, and you would know how many people you were going to feed, and you would take enough food for 2 or 3 days.
Oh, wow.
Where now we just fix one meal the day of the funeral. But we had to feed, there was no place to go get a bucket of fried chicken or anything. It was just.
So where do you think that UMW now is heading? Because we no longer do a lot of that stuff.
I don't know, but you know, we have some people that come. It worries me. They'll come one time and you don't see them anymore. So we're not offering what they need. You know what I mean? I don't know exactly our programs, or we had some interesting programs, and our programs are, sometimes we have somebody come and speak to us. We haven't done that in a good while. And then we're meeting during the summer, going to the restaurants and that sort of thing. Well, of course, there were no restaurants to go to. And if you wanted a hamburger or a hot dog, you cooked it yourself, or you went to Jacksonville.
That's a long way to go for a hot dog.
Yeah. But we did it.
Well, do you think that because you mentioned that back then,
I don't know where
women didn't work as much and all this. Do you think the changing dynamic of the family is altering the way the UMW works?
It does. Yeah, because now I noticed the last time we met, I was sick for a long time and didn't go to the meetings. So I don't know when they started coming, but we had some young people. And I thought that was encouraging.
Well, it took us a while to get the daycare worked out, and that's an issue. Is do you bring in, with families that come and go, because there are several people now that come a little bit, don't come. Do you line up these services in hopes that people show up and then not need them?
Right.
Or do you not provide them, and then if those people show up, with the families dynamics changing like that, how do you adjust the way the UMW works to still have value for the older members, and also have value for the new people coming up?
Right. And I think that value comes from the circles.
So how do you bring those back? How do we bring back that
we would have to advertise that we were going to start having circles, and just get somebody to be chairman of the circle. You have to have a chairman, and usually you have a sunshine chairman, because you pass the hat around.
Sunshine Fund.
And what else did we have? We had a program chairman in each circle, and we had books that they got the programs out of. And we don't have books now. So when they asked me to do the program, I said, well, I can tell you a little bit about how it was when I first started. But we did everything in the church. It's just like when we came to St. Mary's, the only service club that they had, there was no Kiwanis, no United Way Fund, or very few. They did have a little scouting program, but it was not nothing compared to what they have now. And it was just, the church was your social activities. And that's why I wonder if we will, at Greater Trinity, the church is still the social activity of the people who go to Greater Trinity. And I wonder if...
So do they have their own branch of the UMW and all of those?
They used to. Some of the black people come to our church now. And
is that what that church was back in the 50s? Was that the African American Methodist Church?
Well, it was the black people went to this church and the white people went to this church. And there was no integration. And then that came with the schools and everything else, it was integrated. But see, when my kids went to elementary school, we had a black elementary school right down the street. It was where the pond is now. You know that pond?
By the train tracks?
When you cross the railroad?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, all right. Right there sat the black elementary school. And Lily Harris was the principal. And she always invited me to come. Anytime she had a program going on, she invited me to come. And the doctor's wife and I would go. And we were treated royally, and we sat on the front row. And they would have a musical or something, They were always doing that. And that was their social life. See what I mean? The church and the school was their social life. We finally had a JC organization, and we had a Lions Club, and we had, now we have an Elks Club, and we have the Rotary Club, and we have Kingsland and St. Mary's have Kiwanis clubs, I think. And we have
You're full of clubs now.
We have but when I came here, we had a woman's club, and that was it. Everything was done through the woman's club.
So, okay, we have that women's club, and eventually came the men's club.
Yes.
Later on. And so now, with the fluidity of of gender identities coming up, do you think that's going to play a part in how the UMW and the United Methodist Women do you think the changing social
I think
climate
we'll either fizzle out or we're going to grow, one or the other. And I still think, I hesitate to say anything about it, because when you bring up something, you usually get stuck with the job doing it. Right? And so I hate to mention that I think we need circles. We need small groups, and we need to go back to drawing from members of the circle. Now if a school teacher was drawn in a morning circle,
right,
she couldn't possibly go to that morning circle, but she would swap with somebody that didn't work or something, and could go to the morning circle. And it always worked itself out to where.
Because at some point the group gets too big to be a small group.
That's right. If we ever get everybody there at one time. Yeah, very few homes would be big enough.
Right.
For
Because I think the
meet
last
in.
meeting was like 25 people.
But there's just something about going to somebody's house that I think you will go.
Mm-hmm. Just something communal about.
Yeah, it was just very informal and relaxed, and you had a good program, and you tended to business. If the president, if there was a death in the church, you know, and circles were meeting that week, they usually met the first week in the month, and we would say, okay, your circle is responsible for meal on dinner on. We still have breakfast, dinner, and supper.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I grew up, and that's the way we still eat breakfast, dinner, and supper. Well, you were assigned a certain circle would be in charge of the dinner or the supper, and you would plan that at your meeting,
Mm-hmm.
if you had a meeting that during that time. You didn't. That was the trouble with doing that, is you have no control over when people pass on.
Right. We still
You
don't.
know.
Yeah. And one of the things I noticed, because I did the last funeral, was that somebody had mentioned while I was there that it's like you or maybe one other person were in charge of having your finger in the pot, so to speak.
Was what?
Were the people with their fingers in the pot that kind of knew what was going on
Yeah.
in contact. And maybe that's a part of the deterioration that's been going on with UMW is
The
as these
younger
people go
do.
on, there's nobody left with that information.
That's right.
And so how do we, is it something that, you know, we need better procedures or better circle? I mean,
Well,
how does that solve that issue?
What we do now is, and I'm the one that did it, was divide up the list in salads, vegetables, meats, and so forth, and put everybody in the church. Every woman in the church is supposed to be on one of those lists.
Are they?
I don't know. Well, I know that they haven't been updated,
Mm-hmm.
and we've had people join in the church that are not. But it's pretty much the same ones
Mm-hmm.
that do it over and over. And when we're gone,
Then what
who's
happens?
gonna do it?
That's the key, is how do we
That's
train
what-
up the,
That worries
how do we
me.
train up the young women
All right.
to know that there's a place in the UMW for them?
And a lot of the young people feel like, well, you don't have to have all this that you used to have when we had no restaurants here. You can go to the deli, you know, and buy stuff already fixed.
It's not the same.
And it's not the same. And I think it's good to have home-cooked food. It's just like we have never in my life let a preacher move into town, a new preacher, and not have food, a meal prepared in the refrigerator or in the house for them to, they all have to move the same day because they're moving into each other's house.
Oh, okay.
So they have
Seems
moving
reasonable. I
day.
didn't realize that, but it seems reasonable.
But they have moving day when all the preachers move. Now, a lot of them are moving, and their moving van will pull up before this one leaves.
Well, see, and I didn't even, and I'm
And-
a part of UMW, and I didn't even know those were some of the duties that we did.
Yeah.
So how do we get that message out that the UMW is more than just a sewing circle? I'm not nothing
Right.
against sewing circles, but
It's more than just a
sewing
meat
circle.
need.
Right. That these are other things
that need to be done.
Right.
So I don't know what it would take. It's a whole new thing, and I don't know whether the circles would go over or not. But we had 6, and they each had 12, at least 12 people in each circle. They might have had 13, or they might have had 11, but they had around 12. So that's 60 people
72.
that a long time ago.
Yeah. That's a big UMW group.
Yes. And now we're down to what, 15 or 20?
I think we're about almost to 2 dozen, but they don't all come regularly.
Yeah.
You know, which I think is getting a little big for
one group,
one
meeting.
Because you can't really have those discussions and
I know it.
The Bible readings or the this or the that. You almost have to have a speaker.
Yeah.
Present something because there's too many people to do otherwise.
Yes, that's right.
As the dynamics of the people there change.
Enough emphasis is put on the program.
And I think that's what draws people into groups like that.
I think so.
You know, when people come to new groups, they don't want to know, okay, what's the budget here?
Mm-hmm.
They want to know, how is this going to feed my well? How am I going to grow?
And we had things going on all the time, and it kept us busy doing the church work. And I don't know, now we have, I call them pew warmers, that just come on Sunday and you don't see them at anything. They're not on a committee or anything during the week.
And so what do you think, in your opinion, what would be how do you get people out from the pews and into the church?
I don't know. I really don't, but that worries me, that we're not as busy as we used to be. And I don't know if the circles would be the answer to getting more people involved in the church. I don't know if they would go back to drawing for a circle or something and changing circles at the year.
We have a similar situation in the Sunday school. You know, in the children's church in the middle of service, there's a ton of children.
I know it.
But in the children's Sunday school, there's only,
I know it.
you know, there's only a handful.
And that's because I think of the time element. When we went from 2 services to 1 service, the preacher did not want to say, we did away with my service, the 8:30 service or the 11 o'clock service. That's why we start
At
Sunday
10.
school at 10.
Or
We
start the
did
church
away
at 10.
with both of the services instead of 1 service. And it put Sunday school
At 8:45.
at 8:45. And it's, a lot of people they claim they can't get their children up and get dressed and come to Sunday school. But they get them off to school. You know. So it's still, our class particularly went down a lot because, well, I shouldn't call names, but people were coming regularly to Sunday school when Sunday school was
In the middle,
In
right
the
after
middle.
their service, right
Yeah.
before their.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I think there's a committee. We have committees for everything now.
Yes, we do.
But I think there's a committee that's working on whether we should go back to 2 services. And
Do you
have
think
Sunday
that's an
school
answer?
in the middle. It might be worth a try. I don't know. But I know that it's hurt the Sunday school.
Well, and this isn't just an issue that our church has. This is a church, across the country. A global
Right.
church issue is how do you get people into the church, but B,
And
once
how do
they're
you
there,
get them involved?
how do you get them involved? How do you get them out of just going to Sunday morning service?
I know it.
And we're such a fast society now.
Yeah,
Everything
we are.
moves so quickly.
Everybody's so busy.
How do you
There's
get
other things. They have other meetings to go to that's not church related. And I don't know. Maybe we're spreading ourselves a little thin. But
And how do you make it, one of the things I always say is that you'll never find the time to do what you need to do. You have
Yeah.
to make it.
right,
But to make it, it has to be a priority.
right.
And
And
how do we
you-
bring fellowship back to a
You
priority?
have to want to.
Mhm.
And I don't know how to create that want. I don't know, but I think when we had two services, the two services were a lot alike. And I think this committee Robert's on that committee,
I know that
And-
one was going to be real contemporary, the new one.
and they want to have two different types of
Mhm.
services. Because we've lost a lot of people to Agape and other churches that used to be in our church.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a need for the traditional service and the contemporary service.
And then how can UMW play a role in that?
They could go back to having a night circle and a day circle for those older people. We have a lot of members of our church, Fay Lentz for one, that I think she would love to be in a circle and have somebody. What we did when we had the old people mixed in with the young people, your circle met the first time and we said, okay, who's going to be responsible for picking up Ms. So-and-so? You went and you picked them up, you
Make
went
sure they
in the
got there.
house and you helped them out to the car, and when you took them home at night, or whenever it was, especially if it was at night, you went in the house and you looked under the bed and everything to be sure nobody was in there.
Women
And
helping women.
If they lived alone,
Mm-hmm.
we looked after. We knew who was diabetic, and we also, when I was having refreshments, if I was in the circle with Miss Bessie Smith, I would, that's Charlie Smith Jr.'s
Mhm.
grandmother that I was in a circle with. And I would fix her some Jell-O or something, the unsweetened Jell-O, because I knew she was diabetic. And we looked after the old people.
Which is important.
It is.
Which is,
Because they are the backbone, they were the backbone of the church.
we need to, we're supposed to look after the old people. We're supposed to look after the children.
That's right. That's right.
And I think somewhere along the way, a lot of that got lost.
It did.
On both,
Definitely.
on both ends.
Definitely.
So, and it's
Got
up to,
lost. And
it's
I
up
don't
to
know
the groups,
what
it's up to
gonna
like
take to bring it
UMW and
back.
these groups to force it back.
Mhm.
It's not gonna, change doesn't happen on its own.
Yeah.
So I think,
But when we came to St. Mary's, we had the grind telephones. You ground it, turned a thing and picked up the thing, and the receiver, talked into the mouthpiece. And but it had its advantages. I would say I would crank and crank and crank, and until somebody answered me, till the operator answered me. And she'd say, who do you want to call? Well, nobody knew what their number was. You just gave them a name. And I'd say, ring Doc Barker, please. And she'd say, well, Doc Barker's over at Helen Carter's and they're having coffee. I think there's some other people there too. Do you want me to ring Helen Carter's house, or do you want to just go join them? And 9 times out of 10, I'd say, well, I'll go join them. I'll have coffee with them too. And there we go. But the telephone was the thing that tickled me. And if you heard the mill whistle blow, that meant there was a fire. They had a whistle out there that would wake up the dead. And when it blew, you knew there was a fire somewhere, but you could always crank your phone and call the operator and say, where's the fire? Now you have to go get in your car and go to find the fire. But there was advantages and disadvantages. You didn't tell anybody a secret over the phone.
Because the operator was listening.
Right. And, well, you couldn't get a straight line when we came here. For our house, only businesses had a straight line. There were 3 houses next door to each other. And she was one of them. And the Kettle Baiters were the other. And we were in the middle. And a long and a short. See, when they would ring somebody, they would have to ring a long time and then a little doop, short. And my number might be a long and a short. My neighbor might be a long and a 2 longs. Or my other neighbor might be 2 shorts.
Because everybody's
and it
phone was
rang
ringing?
in everybody's house.
And you just
Every
had to
time
wait and
it
see,
rang,
was this my
it rang
sound?
in everybody's house. But there was one of my neighbors didn't have but 1 car, and everybody did shift work at the mill. And they had 3 shifts. It never shut down. And she would call me. She would just crank my number. She didn't have to go through the operator to call me. She would ring if mine was a long and a short, she would ring that and I'd pick it up. And she'd say, I've got to run to the grocery store. I'll be back in a minute. If my husband calls, answer my phone and tell him I'll be out to pick him up in a little while. He's having to work over. And
because if he called her, it's going to ring in your house.
yeah. So if her phone rang, then I would answer it. And
so that kind of, it's kind of forced people to interact with each other.
Oh yeah, it did. And you knew that every time your phone rang, it was ringing in the houses on either side of you. They tried not to put more than 3 on a line.
So if you were getting calls in the middle of the night,
yeah,
everybody knew.
Yeah, everybody knew. It woke up everybody in the neighborhood. So.
And now everybody in the house has a phone.
We've come a long ways in St. Mary's. We've come a long ways.
We have. And there's still.
And the churches have changed, and I don't know. I think it's up to Robert's generation to make some changes, probably. Or even, well, he's in his mid-50s now. So there's a generation below him.
That's my generation.
Yeah.
And just design.
Because I tend to be of the old school, that I want it to be like I grew up with, and that's the traditional.
But there's something to be said, while we're looking forward and moving forward into the future, we don't want to forget. We don't want to forget where we came from.
Well, I know it.
Because
and that's
there
what
was
worries
that human
me
aspect that we tend to lose.
There's so many things, like I started to tell you a while ago that the preacher moving in, I called Martha McGinn and I said, Martha, do you want to help me cook a meal for the new preacher that's moving in? Because
this last
I don't think, I don't think that we've ever had a preacher move in that he didn't have sheets on the bed, clean kitchen, a full meal.
And that's why I wonder, why isn't there a committee for that? I'm not, okay, let me
I
not use the
know.
word committee, but
It's
within the
one of the
UMW, why
things-
isn't there, like,
It's one of the
these are
things
your
that
group.
nobody's thinking of. See, your generation doesn't know
yeah, I didn't know
that
that.
we do that. And it was easier for me and Martha just to get together and plan a meal. She made potato salad and cooked some pot of green beans, and I baked a ham and made a congealed salad. And
Right, but if you were ill, who would do that?
I know it.
And,
I
and so
wondered about that.
I really think, I see groups like the UMW that, we have a lot of older members, and
Yeah.
some of these things that, like the making the dinner for passion, these things, I'm like, how come we didn't know that this happened? Because there is nothing saying,
I know.
oh yeah, we do this. Why isn't
I
it
know
written
it.
somewhere, hey, we do this. Hey, this is how this works.
This might be just something that we do, this fixing a meal for the preacher, for the new preacher
But it's
moving
something
in.
that should be done.
It makes sense.
It
that
makes
you
them feel
do it.
welcome.
And I don't know whether Kingsland does that or not. They got a new preacher this year, same as we did. And I don't know whether it's just something that St. Mary's does or whether it's something that all
But is
churches
that something
do.
like in the manual
But-
that's handed off to the president? Oh yeah, here's the list
I
of the
feel
stuff we
like
typically
it's
do.
what was done in Scriven, Georgia when I was growing up.
And now.
And so I came to St. Mary's and it was being done here.
But it's kind of like,
And
you said
picking
you
up
got
the
here and you
old
didn't know how to
people.
cook because
Yeah.
your grandmother and your mom were all like, okay, let's just do it.
Right.
Well, now we have these younger
My
UMW
mother
members
was working.
that don't know that don't know this stuff happens
Mm-hmm.
because there's a subset of older members that take care of it.
But
And
you
maybe
know,
that left with the circles, when the circles became interest-led circles, we
Yeah.
lost some of the, the older and the younger members.
Yeah, they were drawn
Going
in
together. So, I don't know how to fix it, but I think the UMW is still such a vital part
I think
of
it
the
is.
church. It's
It
so
has
important.
always been a vital part of the church.
And it's got such
I
a
hate
rich
to see
history. Yeah.
We do the food, but for one meal, and we fed them.
Well, and there's so many opportunities for, like when we do the funeral things, why aren't there Stephen ministers there?
Yeah,
Because that's
that's
what they do,
They do,
right?
right? That's what they're supposed to do.
Or why aren't, when we do these things, why isn't this group part of that?
I don't know who our Stephen ministers are.
Well, I'm one of them. But
Well, see, that's something that fizzled out. We didn't have them for a long time. We used to have them, and then we didn't have them for a long time because probably nobody would be in charge of it. So maybe one day we'll have an associate pastor, and maybe it'll be a woman, and she will be more interested in the women's work of the church. And maybe that's the future. I don't know.
it'll be exciting when it gets here.
Yeah,
That's
and I think we have a good pastor now. We had a good pastor, and I think we have another one. And a lot depends on the preacher. It is, can't help it.
And a lot depends on the preacher, but in the Methodist tradition, with itinerant preachers, a lot has to depend on
And
the lay people.
we don't have any small groups. And John Wesley
I noticed that.
believed in the small groups, meeting in the homes and things like that. So we have from time to time a Bible study or something like that, but it's usually in the daytime when the old people can go, but the young people are all working. It just about takes 2 incomes now
Yes.
for most families. And
Which means that you have to schedule things well, because you have to schedule something for the kids and something for the adults
right,
at a time when people aren't working.
I probably told you more than you bargained
I think
for.
it's fascinating, and I appreciate you. I know it was kind of out of the blue that I came, and I was like, "Can you do an interview?" But
And does your job call for you interviewing people?
this is my passion.
Oh,
So-
you just do that?
So my day job, I work. I develop curriculum, but I'm trying to build this platform with the speaking and the writing and all of these things.
Yeah.
And one of my big topics for my platform is the more we learn about each other, the more we'll find out we're not all that different.
That's right.
Because I have these little ads that are running with these that said,
Uh,
I met so-and-so and I learned so much. Who have you learned from today? Because this idea that without, hatred stems from a lack of education. It stems from people not understanding each other.
yeah.
And you're not going to understand each other until
You know each other.
you talk to each other.
Mhm.
Hi, I'm Brandy from Exploring Expressions. You just finished hearing about and from somebody interesting. I hope you enjoyed learning about them as much as I did. I just want to take a minute to let you know that I am always on the hunt, exploring new opportunities to learn, teach, grow, and share, and looking for people with interesting jobs, interesting hobbies, interesting histories, or interesting ideas. If that's you, or if you know someone that's interesting, drop a comment below or send me a message because I want to talk to them. And as always, if you like this video, make sure to hit like and subscribe and follow me. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. Let me know you're out there. We'll see you later.